For those of you that don't understand the beautiful Lakota language, it's a very formal greeting that's given in settings like this. And what I said was that I shake each of your hands and open my heart to you. And I also have to give a special greeting back to Rosebud, on Zoom right now. Rocky Makes Rooms class at St. Igleshka University is listening in. So, so, and I think, as Deborah talked about, and I think you're going to hear this over and over again, that for the tribal nations, these treaties are living documents. They're important. Every tribal nation knows which treaty belongs to them and what rights come to them. And it's only in the last 30 or 40 years, I believe, that the tribal nations have really begun to understand the power and the sovereignty that they have in those treaties and in the United States Constitution. And I have to say something, in the late 60s, early 70s, I was just a kid, but a lot of this renaissance that's happening in Indian country was because of guys like Oren Lyons that were out there just raising hell all over the nation, from Alcatraz to Washington, D.C. There were people that put all these things in motion, and all of a sudden you see universities that have Native American studies departments. I mean, in South Dakota, where we have all these natives, we didn't have a Native American studies department at the University of South Dakota until the 1970s. And it was because of people like you, Oren, that were out there saying, hey, we need to do something like this. So there's all this strength and there's all this power, and we're beginning to understand what all of that means. And I get the privilege and honor of introducing to you Chief Brad KillsCrow. Chief KillsCrow is a member of the Lenape and Lakota tribes, and his parents are Anthony and Linda Weaver KillsCrow. On his Lenape side, he is a descendant of Mary Elizabeth Randall Journeycake Weaver. His great-grandparents were Basil Weaver and Jesse Thomas. On his Lakota side, he is a descendant of Chief KillsCrow Indian and Big Belly. He was raised in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. He attended Bacone College on a basketball scholarship. And when he gets up here, you'll understand. you'll see how that came about. He joined the U.S. Navy. He's a Navy veteran. He served in the Persian Gulf on an aircraft carrier. After that, he worked in law enforcement from 2002 to 2011, and he's a graduate of the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center done by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. For the past 7 years, he's been employed by the Tonkawa Tribe of Oklahoma as director of their Indian Community Development Block Grant Program. During that time, the Tonkawa Tribe received federal grant funds for economic development projects that included construction of a truck stop, a convenience store, an RV park, and a motel. Other projects he oversaw included housing rehabilitation, mold removal, and emergency construction of a sewer system. It is his duty to provide leadership and maintain tribal culture and values, providing services to tribal members, and ensuring a viable future through economic development. And as we talk about economic development, Deborah, I want to know, am I eligible for one of those elder cards? Sounds like a pretty good deal. I want to know where I sign up. He lives in Ponca City, Oklahoma, lives with his wife, Whitney, and he coaches boys basketball and is an active participant in powwows and ceremonies. And he has served as the master of ceremonies for the annual Delaware powwow for the past 12 years. So I'd like to bring up Chief Brad KillsCrow. Kanri Wichakta.
Thank you. Kulimaso Hutch. My name is Chief KillsCrow. I'm the chief of the Delaware Tribe of Indians out of Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Earlier, you got to listen to our relative here, President Dotson. We are of the same tribe, with the same language, the same history. Unfortunately, we took separate paths, and we have two separate nations. But we work together, and we accomplish a lot. We are with each other a lot. But I just kind of want to make that distinction before I get started here. I want to thank everybody for. It's been a wonderful week. The hospitality, everything has been great here. I feel very welcome, and I just want to just get that out there, let you know that the West Virginia University has been hospitable to myself and the rest of the leaders here. Me myself, I'm a 46-year-old young man. I'm a young chief. It's in my tribe, my people. Put me in this position. It's a position that I hold dear to my heart. It's a position that it's not something to play with. It's not something. These are my people that I have to take care of. And long history of our Lenape people. You know, as President Dotson say, we are a matriarchal society. And growing up, you know, I'm a mixed blood. I'm an Iesca. I'm Lakota. My dad's full blood Lakota from Pine Ridge, from the Slim Buttes area, and my mother's Lenape. So in our society, you talk to my mom, she'll tell you, you know, my son's Lenape. He's not Lakota. He's Lenape. You talk to my dad, if my mom's not around, he's Lakota and Lenape. And so it just depends on how that goes. But I follow my mother's matriarchal, that's the way how we do in our customs and culture. I'm still familiar with our Lakota sides. I still go back and participate in the ceremonies in South Dakota, but I have to follow my mom's. That's just the way we are. So given that, I just kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit. Our tribe, we're 13,000 members. We, unlike the Anadarkos, where they have a blood quantum, you know, they have a certain amount, we base our enrollment off descendancy. And so that's how we're able to have such a big number of tribal members, citizens within our tribe. Lenape, the Delaware, you know, we're two different things, we're called two different titles, you know, Delaware and Lenape. We call ourselves Lenape, but the English, you know, call ourselves Delaware. They refer to us. The Lenape, meaning the original people, was just one of those indigenous groups. In 1524, Giovanni de Verrazano sailed into the New York Bay, and he was met by Lenape canoes. At that time, he estimated there were 20 to 80,000 Lenape living in a loose confederacy of villages stretching from the New York Bay to the Catskills and scattered throughout the New Jersey and eastern third of Pennsylvania and in northeastern Delaware along the Delaware Bay. In 1610, Lord Delaware, a wealthy Englishman, was appointed the first governor of the Jamestown colony in Virginia. Although he only spent a short time in North America and did little exploration, map makers put his name on the Delaware Bay and Delaware River, and the indigenous people living in that area were identified as Delaware. So today, the Lenape people are also known, again, as Delawares, after Lord Delaware. You know, I got a whole lot of notes here and things here, but after I was reading up here, and it says the connection to place. And after I listened to Elder Orrin Lyons talk last night, and when I came into this position as chief of my tribe, we had no idea that our ancestors were being dug up on the East Coast. We had no idea that the graves were being desecrated, and to the extent that people were housing, you know, our ancestors in their basements. Universities were hosting them and having them in their archives, and so we worked very, very diligently to get those ancestors back, and we just had a big repatriation in Pennsylvania for our ancestors and to put them back and to reintern them back into earth. At that time, it was in Pennsylvania, was my first time to ever step foot in the homelands. And growing up as a young boy, listening to the stories from my elders and from my folks, they talk about these giant trees. They talk about these canoes, these waterways, these giant hills, and a lot of the stories that have been passed down. I don't know if many of y'all have been to Oklahoma, but it's not a destination. There's a reason why the federal government put us there, because there's not a whole lot there. And so growing up as a young boy, hearing all these stories, they were kind of like fairy tales, because I couldn't put them together. I'd walk outside in Oklahoma and it's just, Oklahoma. And I don't get to see these giant trees, what they're talking about, what my elders, are talking, and it didn't make sense. But the first time I came back for that repatriation and the work that we were doing, I stepped foot. They took me to the Delaware Water Gap, where we was our strong area where our Lenape people lived. And at that time, when I was on the water at the Water Gap, I felt what the stories that I've been told. I seen it with my own eyes, what they were talking about, and it all made sense at that time. And as a man, it brought me to tears, because I could see it. I could see where the canoes would go. I could see where our people hunted. I see the paths. I see the huge giant trees. And it was a life-changing moment, because I knew that I belonged. My ancestors lived on this land, and I belonged to this land that they had so much took care of for many, many years. I just wanted to share that little personal story with you about my connection to the land, about my connection. I've never seen Pennsylvania until that one time, and when I was there, I felt at home. I felt my ancestors welcoming me back to the homelands. So every time I have an opportunity to come back out here east, I jump on it quickly. West Virginia, we had, like President Dotson said, we had some fishing. We had some things in this area too. I have that same feeling today that, I'm walking where my ancestors walked. I may be walking in Morgantown. Who knows? My ancestors may have walked this same path. But I have that good feeling with me in my heart, knowing that I belong here. I'm from here. I'm from this area. And that makes me feel good today. As a Delaware tribe, as we move forward, the biggest thing that we had set forth was food sovereignty. We wanted to know what we could do to help our people. So we purchased a ranch, 42,000 acre ranch. We got cattle. We opened up a food pantry. Our cattle were able to utilize for our meat. So all of our Delaware people at home, no matter what, they can come and get groceries. They can come and get food, no questions asked. And that's the sovereignty. That's taking care of our people. And that's what we're supposed to do as leaders, is take care of our people is the best way that we possibly can. So we try to instill that in our tribe, with our young ones, with the guidance of our elders and the rest of our tribe. We try to be self-sufficient. We're in the process of planting a giant orchard, and we have all kinds of plans for to continue this food pantry, not just through ARPA monies, but through sustainability through many years to come, so our people will be able to have the opportunity to eat. The Delaware tribe is also very instrumental in our culture as well. We do have committees. We do have leaders within our tribe, and they are very instrumental in continuing our language, continuing our culture, our ceremonies, the things that we do that makes us who we are. We continue that on a daily basis there in the Bartlesville area as the best that we possibly can. So, like I said, I had a whole lot of stuff here to write, but I really wanted to really let you guys understand my connection to this land, how I feel. I don't know if, maybe you go someplace and you feel a connection to the land, but every time I come back here, come back east, I feel welcomed. I feel that my ancestors are here with me, and I feel that I belong here. You know, Oklahoma is Oklahoma. Unfortunately, you know, history wasn't kind to the Lenape, but we're still here. We're still here today. We've been tried. They've tried to wipe us out. They've tried to do other things to get rid of the Lenape. But I'm proud to stand here and tell you that we are still here, and we will continue to be here as long as Creator allows us. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to share that little bit with you this morning. I know I can go on and on. I'm not sure exactly where, you know, where I want to go, but I just want to leave you with that today and say Wanishi and thank you, and God bless. Yeah.
Do you want to just right over here? So thank you for that very stirring account of your first visit back to the ancestral homelands on your mother's side. You're really important and very touching. And one of the first things we tell our students on the first day of class is, you know, there are thousands of students walking around here. We today are not the first people to walk here. People were walking here 20,000 years ago. So, and we look at the Monongahela River and throughout Pennsylvania and other places, those long dugout canoes resurface after a flood here or a flood there. Some of them are 1,000 years old, 3,000 years old around the country. It's quite, quite amazing. So I have a little presentation here for Chief KillsCrow. A few years ago, I was at the National Congress of American Indians. I've been a non-voting member since 2005, and I really like to go and keep up connections with Native leaders and other people advocating for Native rights and try to stay as contemporary and current as possible in my teaching and bring materials back to our classrooms. And in one of those sessions at NCAI, the late chief of the Delaware Tribe of Indians, Chet Brooks, gave an impassioned presentation. The Delaware is called the grandfather tribe, as I recall. And he was discussing that. He was advocating for a particular issue that required consent, of course. Always consensus building has to take place in those settings for a resolution to move forward. And he gave an impassioned plea. I believe it had to do with land in Kansas, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure that was it. And it failed. It didn't vote forward. And I saw really how crestfallen he was. And I always take books with me and gifts and things from West Virginia to share. And I had some. So I made sure to greet him as he came down off the dais and toward the back of the room. And he looked so deflated. And so I met him and I thanked him for his remarks. He talked about his own ancestors there out west building one of the last traditional homes. As I recall, that was part of what touched me. So I presented him with one of our Peace Tree books, and I thanked him. I thanked him for, you know, advocating for his people in such a strong way and for sharing with the general audience there at NCAI. And when I presented him with the book, he immediately took off this huge silver and turquoise ring and placed it in my hand in an act of reciprocity. And of course, I knew enough protocol to know that I shouldn't say, oh, I can't take that, or that's too much, or I'm just giving you a little book or something like that. So I said, this is an amazing gift. And he said, that's the Indian way. You know, if we're given something, we give back. And so I decided, since we have the current chief of Delaware tribe here, I'd been wanting to pass this along to perhaps a young male leader in some of our classes, a Delaware student perhaps, and that just didn't happen. So I discussed this with Chief KillsCrow ahead of time, and I want to present him with Chief Chet Brooks' ring and thank him for his current leadership and for taking on the mentorship of Chief Brooks and keeping that strong legacy of leadership going forward.
Questions? Are you good?
Yeah, we do have questions. Jennifer, do you see some questions over there? There's one, I believe that, well, one question that was shared with me that someone showed me from the Zoom. A person was talking about the map. We shared a photo of the map with our online Zoom audience. And I think this is a good question for all of you leaders here today. A person asked the question, why is there so much overlap? And how is it that on a map of territories that are understood to be one tribe or another tribe, why that overlap? And of course, I'll defer and ask our leaders to address that question. But I want to also include an anecdote that that Dr. Margaret Pierce, the cartographer who made that map, shared with all of us. She took our class up to Mason-Dixon Park, just north of Morgantown. And many of the locals here know Mason-Dixon Park. It's a beautiful spot. And that's the end of the line for the Mason-Dixon survey. That's where their last stone marker was erected. And you can go out there, you see where they mark the other chains, as they call it, the distance, surveying that Mason-Dixon line in the mid-1750s. And we looked at the journals of Mason and Dixon, and they describe in there, and I think this is interesting with Brad standing here, they describe among the Indian guides who were guiding them westward as they surveyed all the way across Pennsylvania and out to this part of the country, the tallest Indian man, or the tallest man they'd ever seen. And I thought, okay, that would be interesting to think about those. I think one was English and one was Scottish. Maybe the tallest man they'd seen could have been super tall or maybe not that tall. We don't know. But here's the thing. Mason and Dixon wanted those Delaware and Seneca guides to continue taking them westward. Now, Dunkard Creek at its widest point is probably half as wide as this room. And the Seneca and Delaware guides said, we will not take you past the third crossing of Dunkard's Creek. Our chiefs have ordered this, that we not take you beyond the third crossing of Dunkard's Creek, because that is Shawnee country, and we have an agreement with the Shawnee. So the third crossing of Dunkard's Creek, just a little, serpentine creek, just north of Morgantown, that was an understood boundary back in the 1750s and for who knows how long prior to that. So that's my little anecdote that I enjoy thinking about when we talk about overlapping territories, the myths of hunting grounds, the realities of hunting grounds, and then the understood boundaries of one nation's territory and another's. So I'll turn this over to you, Brad, if you want to answer that question about understandings about overlapping ancestral territories. And Catherine, as a historian, I'm sure will want to address that as well, perhaps. Sure.
Sure, I believe, I think some of the overlapping could, so many historians throughout the years may have not always gotten it right, and history has not always been written right. So maybe the territorials of different tribes, different nations, have maybe the boundaries that have not always been what you see in textbooks today, but they were known back then. The tribes knew where their areas were. We knew where we're supposed to go. We knew what was ours. We didn't have an understanding of land, of this is our land, or this is our air, this is our water, until the Europeans came over and made that to us. So I believe, like I said, I think with history, those type of things, the overlapping, it could have been a series of different things. Would be my guess.
We have a question. We have a question over there with the moderator.
I guess I'm Barb Howe. I'm a historian, so.
No apology needed.
Thank you. But with Cherokee roots. Anyway, this is not so much a question as to let you all know that there is a group in West Virginia called the West Virginia Coalition for Truth in History. We are gearing up again for the legislative session. If you're a West Virginian, you know what that means, starting in January for 60 days. You'd better be aware of what's happening. Ron Allen, who was up here before, Ron, raise your hand again. and I are involved in many others in this room. If you'd like to be on our mailing list for Zoom meetings to talk about legislation that's affecting how history is taught in the state, we focused more on race and LGBTQ, but obviously this is important also. So please either see me or Ron and give us your card, your email or something, and we'll get you on the Zoom list to be part of those discussions.
Any other questions in the Zoom chat? All right, well, thank you very much, Chief KillsCrow.